This is the Chris DeGaulle Show podcast.
Okay, guys, let's just rip. And Chris DeGaulle.
Chris DeGaulle. Chris, thanks for being with me tonight.
Chris DeGaulle.
I'm joined now by Chris DeGaulle.
Now, as downloadable as he is lovable, it's Chris DeGaulle.
It's middle of the week. It's Wednesday, March 24th, and I thank you so much for downloading the Chris DeGaulle Show podcast. It is not important to you. It never ceases to amaze me, though, what a little technical problem can do to shows, radio shows like ours in the year 2021. Glad you're with us, and thanks a lot for your emails and your feedback on social media. I have told you, if you're new to this podcast, maybe you don't know, but I think I've told everybody that listens, I do 2 radio shows a day, one for Philadelphia and one for Kansas City, and I do this podcast typically in between. I'm not going to bore you with a lot of the rigmarole, but suffice it to say, in Philadelphia, where I typically do these shows, our dependence on the internet is kind of freakishly alarming, and I didn't really realize how alarming it was until we completely lost our internet capabilities inside our building. And we have crackerjack engineers who are working around the clock right now to fix it, but the good people of Comcast, some of you have actually written to say, do you think it was intentional? I don't think it was intentional. I don't think they care enough, but who the hell knows for sure. Anyway, coming to you from Stately DeGaulle Manor today to do this podcast, and I'm going to have to keep it somewhat brief. I'm going to do some mailbag coming up. Cam Edwards of BearingArms.com will be with us today. We're going to talk about this shooting in Boulder. There's more to learn about it, but I just want you to know, those of you that listen to the podcast or listen to the radio shows online, I've gotten your notes. I've gotten your thoughts. I understand that we're having some terrible difficulties, people trying to hear the show and our app and streaming and blah, blah, blah. It's a mess, and it's unfortunately because of Comcast and the internet that basically allows us to broadcast to, in fact, I need the internet to broadcast to Kansas City. And when I don't have the internet, I can't broadcast to Kansas City. So I have to come home and do it from the house instead, which I'd rather not do. But at any rate, I just wanted to let you guys know that. It's been what a bizarre time and a weird week on this end of it. None of that matters to you, though. As long as I'm here, as the great Rush Limbaugh used to say, you don't care where here is. Just get to it, DeGaulle. So I will. Let me actually start by addressing something that I talked about on my show in Kansas City today. It's funny. In Missouri, the Attorney General there, who just announced, incidentally, he's going to run for Senate there in Missouri. It's going to be a amazing Senate race, one to really watch. You're going to hear more about it no matter where you live. You're going to hear about this Missouri Senate race. Roy Blunt, the senior senator from Missouri, is stepping down. The junior senator, who you know well, Josh Hawley, whose book was just dumped from Simon & Schuster. He's all over television all the time. Josh Hawley comes from the Attorney General's office in Missouri. He won the Senate seat, of course. Now, what's amazing is Eric Greitens, who's the former governor of Missouri, you may or may not even know this story, but Eric Greitens got caught up in what wound up being largely a fake story. There was infidelity, but it was alleged that he was in some kind of weird dominatrix sex dungeon abusive thing with his mistress, and it was largely made up and untrue. He did have an affair, but beyond that, the sex dungeon, abuse stuff was all made up. Nevertheless, he resigned when that whole thing began to bubble up, and his lieutenant governor, Mike Parson, stepped in, became governor of Missouri, and just won a second term. So Greitens has been largely sidelined, but well thought of by conservatives, legitimately won statewide in Missouri. What's interesting, though, after that scandal and subsequent embarrassment, at that time, Josh Hawley, who's now a senator, called for him to step down, that he should resign. There is no love lost between Greitens and Hawley. Greitens has now announced he wants that Senate seat that Roy Blunt is vacating in Missouri. So there's some high drama in Missouri as Greitens and Hawley, I would not imagine, are close friends, and I don't think Hawley is going to help Greitens at all. In fact, I have every reason to believe that Hawley has probably been on the phone to Donald Trump and said, we can't have this guy as our Republican nominee for Senate. Now, there are a lot of people that love Greitens in Missouri. There are a lot of people that say we can do better, we should do better. That brings in, and the reason I'm bringing this up is the Attorney General of Missouri. This guy's name is Eric Schmitt. Now, watch for him. Eric Schmitt is a guy, he's the guy that was one of the lead attorneys general in that multi-state lawsuit against Pennsylvania, challenging it to the Supreme Court in violating the Constitution on their election rules. He's a stud. He's a player, and he's headed for that Senate seat. So it is going to be Eric versus Eric for sure. There may be some other people in Missouri, but that's just put that on your political radar as one to watch. And whether Trump will get involved, he has people of both candidates, Eric Greitens, Eric Schmidt, both candidates have people, teams, supporters who all have Trump's ear. So I don't know if Trump will weigh in on that. I don't know if Missourians even care for Trump to weigh in on it. Maybe he should just set it out and let them slug it out. But that is going to be, whoosh, that could get very, very interesting in Missouri. Also with Josh Hawley, the current senator there, in the mix. The reason I bring up the Attorney General of Missouri as well is because last night there was a story in Kansas City media about a sting at a massage parlor in a suburb of Kansas City. And as it turns out, since October, the Attorney General of Missouri has been sweeping the state of Missouri, nabbing these massage parlors. Lo and behold, yes, it turns out in Missouri they've figured out that what goes on in a lot of these wink Asian spas was not at all massage, that in fact it's been straight up prostitution. And law enforcement people will tell you this. I've gotten calls and emails from cops that said, yeah, Chris, hell, is anybody that naive? Do people not really understand what's going on? Of course we all understood what's going on. But my point in revisiting this, all of this, you may be saying, where are you going with this, Chris? My point is, I told you this last week. I was shouting this from the roof on the air and on this podcast, this Asian hate crime that we were told was an Asian hate crime involving Asian spas last week, and Georgia wasn't that at all. It was a sex-addicted guy who admitted he was sex-addicted, who we then got surveillance video that showed him walking in, and we don't know what he was doing for the hour before he opened fire in the Asian spa. We don't? Yes, we do. Then, of course, if you check my social media feed, you'll see this for yourself. We find out that these Asian spas that this guy shot up were in fact targeted multiple times over the last decade for legal violations. Law enforcement had busted them several times for prostitution activity going on inside these places. So even the survivors of those who were killed said, we're not really ready to call this a hate crime against Asians, because they know better. This was never about Asians. It was about a sick guy, 21 years old, but he was white, and he shot Asians, so it had to be an Asian hate crime. Did you notice last week, never once did you hear a word about the gun he used in any meaningful way? You didn't hear about it, much talk, maybe, here or there, but that was not the focus. The focus of last week was white guy shoots Asians, even though we knew why, even though I told you why, and the whole thing was a made-up story. He doesn't hate Asians, quite the opposite. He had quite a proclivity for Asians. No reason to shoot them. I mean, I can't even believe I have to say it, but again, I want to be clear. You shouldn't have shot anybody. No one should be murdered, no matter what crime they're committing or what they're doing. It's wrong. So please don't convolute this as me saying, oh, they had it coming or something, which some jerks are seeming to try to twist my words into suggesting that's what I mean. Of course I don't mean that. And common sense people know that too, but my point is, they wanted so badly for that narrative to be Asian hate, they didn't talk anything more about anything else in any meaningful way than racism. Well, then fast forward to this tragic shooting in Boulder. And we now know that 10 white people, I put the picture, collage, up on my social media yesterday. Take a look at the 10 white faces. 10 white people who were assassinated in Boulder by this gunman. Who's the gunman, you say? Well, it turns out we know. A 21-year-old man himself. 21-year-old guy who happens to be Syrian and an Islamist. He's a radical Islamist, folks. And some have said, I don't know this to be true, but the King Superstore there in Boulder, some have told me it is a kosher store or where a lot of Jews in the Boulder area grocery shop. I don't know. I still can't confirm that, so I don't want you to hold me to that, but I know the Jewish community in Boulder has issued a statement saying this is a place where a lot of us shop and we're horrified. I can't confirm whether or not everybody that was there was Jewish, but you got an Islamist, a Syrian, also 21 years old, by the way, who goes in there and starts shooting up the place. Now, early in the day, when we couldn't get reports on who was the shooter and what was going on, the left immediately ran with, by the time we saw them hauling the guy out, you've seen the the overhead helicopter footage of the guy being arrested. They're taking him out in cuffs. He's got the bloody leg. He looks like a fat, pasty, bald white guy, like me. So that excited the American left. Once they saw that guy in handcuffs being led out with the bloody leg and wearing no shirt and no pants, they said, oh, look at that. White guy. Gun. Another probably Trump guy. We've got an epidemic of white guys randomly shooting up places. We got to do something about it. Until we learn later, it was slow to come out. The Boulder police and the media were really slow to let you know finally what we ended up learning. He's an Islamist, a Syrian-born Islamist with a crazy temper and a hatred of Trump. He wasn't a right-winger at all. He wasn't a white right-winger MAGA guy at all. He's an Islamist. He's an anti-Semite, most likely, and he went in to commit murder. Was it of Jews? I don't know, but they were all white. And so on a dime, like it's a play you'd call from an NFL sideline, like it's a play sheet that Andy Reid would have laminated there. It was like, not a white guy, not a Christian guy, not a Trump supporter guy. Okay, go with guns. On two, ready, break. And boy, did they. I mean, they pivoted, and right away, Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were out there talking about an assault weapons ban. We got to do something about these guns. How can a guy like this get a hold of guns like that? We got to have a hard conversation about. So we're back to the filibuster talk again, which if you didn't hear Monday's show, I hope you will. Kelly Johnston and I went through what that is and what that means if we do away with the filibuster. Long story short, it's Katie bar the door. And a gun issue, we know, sadly in this country, it's going to happen from time to time. These mass shootings, every time... If the Democrats can make a case, and right now they were so desperate to make the case that we got to grab the guns, they may well do it by getting rid of the filibuster. So we got to be really on guard about this. I'm bringing Cam Edwards in to talk about it on the show today. And next week on my radio show in Philadelphia at 8 a.m. on Wednesday morning, I'm going to bring in one of my sponsors on the radio to talk about firearms and your legal rights and all of the misperceptions and terms. I'm going to speak to Cam a little about that today, too. We're going to get into a bit. I might even bring him in. I'll see if he can do that next week and be a part of that conversation. You know, the stupid, all the jargon, all the political jargon that's used to scare you. The AR-15, it's an assault weapon, and why do you need military-style assault weapons? And gun show loophole, all of these things that are used to make you think that wild-eyed lunatics are just free to go out there and buy any gun they want, anywhere they want, anytime they want, unencumbered, and never to be stopped. Which, you know, if somebody's a lunatic, they're a lunatic. How can you anticipate they're a lunatic? How do you know? It's a mental health issue. So is there more that can be done or should be done with mental health in this country? You bet. Is that going to be a substantive conversation we're going to have? Of course not. Because coming after your guns and the Second Amendment is more important to them now. Once they couldn't make it a race thing, once they couldn't make it a Trump thing or a white guy thing, now it's an Islamist who shot up a bunch of whites. It's got to be guns. Last week, they didn't care about the guy's gun. Do you know anything about where the guy that shot up the Asian spas got the guns? No. You didn't hear one story about that. It was just that he was a white guy who hated Asians. Anyway, I say all that to say it was just interesting this morning to open my show in Kansas City, seeing that the Missouri Attorney General has just done a sting of some 35 different spas across Missouri, all of which are engaged in prostitution. But that's still, at this hour, not a story you're hearing about these spas in Georgia. I hate the media. I hate what they're doing. It's gross. It's sick. It's divisive, and they know it. And somebody's got to be telling you the truth here. I'm proud that we are. Got some mailbag coming up, but first I want to tell you about my friend and sponsor, John Stillman. Stillman Volvo Cars in Westchester. In fact, I was just talking to John today before I started this podcast. John and the Volvo team at Stillman Volvo are 4 generations going strong. The SC60 is the car that I'm driving currently, courtesy of Stillman Volvo. Beautiful sedan. I think that's the name. I'm not a car guy, but I think that's what they call these 4-door sedans. comfortable, beautiful interior, and a smooth ride. The gas mileage on this thing is crazy. I get incredible gas mileage on it, and boy, does it have some giddy up and go. Not that I speed, officers. Let's just say that when I go in early in the morning to start my morning show in Philadelphia, there's not a lot of traffic, and I've got about a 30-minute commute on the interstate. Sometimes I like to open it up a little bit just to see what it can do. It's a powerful machine. Beautiful sound system. And I just so enjoy driving it. It's one of the many Volvo products. I hope you'll take a good, hard look at Stillman Volvo. They have a website. I'd encourage you to go to it, stillmanvolvocars.com. You can shop online, as people like to do these days. But more importantly, if you are in the area and you're so inclined, I hope you'll drop in on them. They're in Westchester, Pennsylvania on Highway 202. And say hi. Tell them you heard them sponsoring the Chris Stigall Show podcast. They also do some advertising on our Philadelphia show, and I'm grateful to them for that. But I hope it's a name that people know by now after 4 generations. Dads, sons, granddads, they've all purchased Volvos from Stillman Volvo. Some of the safest cars on the open road. Great, great members of the community. They love Philadelphia. They love free speech. They love this country. They love the Lord. There's all kinds of reasons why. For your car buying dollar, I know it's competitive. There's lots of places to go. But I just couldn't more impress upon you, if you want good people and you want honest people and you want to support them because they support the traditions and institutions of this country, perhaps I would encourage you to spend your car buying dollar with people that we share values with, like the Stillman family. StillmanVolvoCars.com. Cam Edwards is a great friend of this show. He's got a podcast that I hope you listen to. One of my colleagues at Town Hall who does great podcasts. Cam and Company is the podcast. He's the editor at BearingArms.com. And unfortunately, the only reason that I ever reach out to him, and that's on me, Cam, I should be better about this. I always reach out when nonsense starts to happen on guns. I'd rather just talk to you about things that aren't so stupid, but glad to have your time this morning anyway. Cam, are you there, buddy?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. Hey, here we go.
Oh, there
sorry
you go.
about that.
No, that's all right.
Speaking of things getting stupid, I forgot to unmute myself.
No, it's been a week. It wouldn't have surprised me if it was also on us. But, no, you know what I mean? It's such a shame because I just did a monologue in the last segment about it. We didn't hear. Not one story, not 1 minute was spent last week on where the guy who shot up the Asian spas got his gun. Did you notice that? They never asked where did that gun come from. In fact, I still don't think anyone's asked where he bought a gun, did they?
I don't know if anybody's asked. I actually know the answer. He ended up buying a gun at a gun store in Georgia.
Okay.
I will say this. The only time that I saw it mentioned was by gun control advocates who said, look, this is why we need waiting periods, because he bought the gun a few hours before he started on his rampage. And so gun control advocates said, well, look, we had waiting periods. Then maybe he wouldn't have done this. I doubt that's the case. Waiting periods, exist in California. In fact, waiting periods have existed across the country over the past year because of the high demand for gun sales. But we know that somebody with murderous intent in their heart is not going to be dissuaded because they have to wait 24 or 48 hours to purchase a firearm.
To me, when it suited them, a 21-year-old white guy shoots Asians, it was about Asian hate. Because an Islamist who's 21 years old bought a gun, he's a Syrian Islamist. He shot nothing but white people in Boulder, 10 white dead people. There's no talk of motive. Now he bought the gun. It's all about the gun. It's all about the gun today. Last week it was all about the Asians. And it just pisses me off, Cam. It's so obvious what's going on here.
It is. And if you've noticed, it's not necessarily a gun control argument when they want it to be a gun control argument, and it's a racism argument when they want it to be a racism argument. Ultimately, the left is, they use these types of tragedies for whatever political purpose they think best suits them at that moment. Ultimately, at the end of the day, their argument boils down to, you need less freedom. You need less liberty. You shouldn't have as many rights as you have. And it doesn't really matter, what argument they're taking. That's the end result, right? We're going to restrict your speech. We're going to restrict your Second Amendment rights. But at the end of the day, it's about, we want to control you.
So I know you were watching closely yesterday, all of the politicians who took opportunity to talk about what we got to do about the guns. Every headline today is Biden urging Congress to tighten nation's gun laws. Headline, Biden calls on Congress to ban assault weapons. So, next Wednesday, a week from this morning, actually, I'm going to spend the full hour with one of our great sponsors at Delaware Valley Sports Center, and Anthony, who owns and runs that place. He's going to come in studio. We're going to take questions, and we're just going to kind of do a Q&A. In fact, I'd love to include you in that discussion next week because I'd like to take calls from listeners and questions. I think definitions are important. A lot of us are not necessarily deep in gun nomenclature. Maybe we own a firearm. Maybe some of us hunt, or maybe we own a handgun, but we don't, definitionally, a lot of people don't know what the difference is in various firearms. And so this broad term of assault weapon, it's always trotted out, and it lands on a lot of people's ears as, well, that seems like a given. Let's get rid of assault weapons. That sounds very dangerous, Cam. You want to tackle that as a broad subject?
Sure. Look, assault weapon, as you say, it's an arbitrary term, as is the phrase high-capacity magazine. Basically, an assault weapon is a gun that somebody wants to ban. And generally what they're talking about are semi-automatic centerfire rifles. These are the most commonly sold centerfire rifles in America today. There are more than 20 million AR-15 or AR-15 variants in the hands of private citizens. And, Chris, it's important to note, these guns are used in a tiny fraction of violent crimes. If you look at the FBI Uniform Crime Report, for any given year, you will find that in any given year, at least twice as many Americans are killed by fists and feet than by a rifle of any kind. So the idea that we're going to ban our way to safety by, getting rid of these magazines or getting rid of these firearms that are not used in a large number of violent crimes is absolutely absurd. We also know that violent criminals, those with murderous intent, can be very effective with handguns, which the Supreme Court has already said are protected under the Second Amendment. So I reject the idea out of hand that we can ban our way to safety. I don't think that we can do that. In a country that embraces our right to keep and bear arms, in a country that has more than 400 million privately owned firearms, there is no way that you can try to reduce the supply of firearms to criminals and think that you're going to be effective. We need demand-based solutions. And there are effective solutions that are out there that don't involve any new gun control laws. Unfortunately, Democrats aren't interested in those ideas.
The AR is a particular target for the left because it looks scary. I remember so well there was a meme running around the last time we had a big gun debate in this country about different attachments to the front of guns. I don't know if it was the AR. I can't even remember. But you remember that meme that was going around where they had chainsaws attached to the end of the bayonet and all that crazy stuff? So often it's the theater of the mind, right? They hold up these scary pictures and they go, look at this scary gun. Speak to that. For people that have never shot one, held one, what is that gun? I mean, people look and they go, well, that looks like something you'd see on a battlefield. We don't need those kinds of guns in people's hands. You get a lot of people that kind of emotionally react to, look at that thing. That's a monstrous weapon. Who needs that?
Yeah. I mean, look, go back and look at, a Winchester repeating rifle from 1873. That was the AR-15 of its day, right? It was easy to use. You could, 14 rounds. And nobody tried to ban it. Matter of fact, Ida Wells, who was a journalist at the time, said that the Winchester repeating rifle deserved a place of honor in every black home as an anti-lynching tool, as a tool for self-defense. Well, the AR-15 is the modern-day equivalent of that. And no, it doesn't look like a Winchester repeating rifle any more than a Tesla looks like a Model T Ford from 90 years ago. We've seen design advancements. We've seen advancements in terms of the materials that are used to make these firearms. AR-15s have a adjustable stock, so somebody like me, who's not a incredibly tall guy, and somebody who's 6'3" or 6'4", we can use that same rifle. We can adjust the stock to fit to fit our own body. So the adaptability, the modability of the AR-15, I think, has been a huge advancement. But it's also a safer firearm than what has been around 100 years ago. And so when folks who see these guns say, "Oh, it looks scary," well, what makes it look scary to you? And more importantly, does it function any differently than an M1 Garand? And the answer is no, it really doesn't. If it's going to look less scary because you put a wood stock instead of a composite stock on it, that doesn't really address the functionality of that firearm. So I think we're getting lost in the wrong things when we start trying to ban things based on their looks.
Biden famously said, and I've talked to you about this before, I remember Biden once famously said when he was vice president, hey, get yourself a shotgun. That's all you need. That's fine. For some reason, like a double-barrel shotgun, like a typical shotgun shell, I guess that makes people feel okay. They're like, well, that's a reasonable gun. That's a gun that everyone should have. That's okay. That's fine. I'm comfortable with that. Even Biden once said, that's all you need. So what of that? When you hear people say that, hey, that's enough. That's fine. That's comfortable. I don't know why you'd need more. What would you say?
Well, my answer is we don't have a bill of needs. We have a bill of rights. And I could go into somebody's house and I could start pointing out, why do you need that? Why do you need that? Why do you really need that? I mean, imagine what this is doing to your carbon footprint. Ultimately, it's not up to anybody else to decide how I choose to protect myself and my family. And we're talking about arms that are commonly owned. The Supreme Court has already said that arms that are in common use for a variety of lawful purposes are protected under the Second Amendment. So to me, there really isn't an argument. I know that the Supreme Court has not weighed in officially on bans on semi-automatic rifles, but these, in my mind, are arms that are protected by the Second Amendment. There is a utility for an AR-15 rifle. The AR-15 that I own, I use to hunt. I've not had to use it for home defense, but I live in a rural area. A police response could easily be 20 or 30 minutes away. And I would really like able to protect myself and my family. I'm going to do that how I see fit. And in this circumstance, I have a home defense shotgun. I have an AR-15 rifle. I have multiple handguns. And
so here, may I I'm sorry to interrupt you, but so someone would hear you say that and they'd say, well, that's a lot of gun. Again, just this is emotional. I like to play devil's advocate and say, that's a lot of guns you own, Cam. Why? Again, I know you say it's not a bill of needs, but people, what would you say to someone who says to you personally, Cam, why do you need all those guns? I mean, okay, you hunt with one, fine. Isn't like a hunting rifle and a handgun enough? Why do you need all those guns? You're not a militia. You're just one guy. Why do you need all those guns? Because people really do puzzle over this. I get that kind of emotional reaction from people a lot.
They do. And I would ask, why does it bother you? What's the difference between me owning 4 guns and 40 guns? I mean, at best, I can only wield 2 of them at once. I've only got 2 hands. So really, I mean, what is the difference? You may not see a need for me to own more than one firearm, but look, we've got plenty of folks who like to collect firearms. I don't have an actual collection. I wish that I did. But, we have hobbyists. We have people who collect historically significant firearms. We have people who just like to work on firearms. Folks with an engineering bent often really, really enjoy working with AR-15s, again, because of that adaptability, the modability factors. But ultimately, again, it's not about need. We don't live in a need-based society. And we also don't live in a society where people who don't understand someone else gets to decide what that other person gets to do. There are lots of people in this country who I don't understand and I don't get.
Right.
But I'm not running around wagging my finger at them saying, no, you're not allowed to do that.
Right. Cam Edwards is at bearingarms.com. He's the editor there. Cam and Company is his podcast. Final question, and I do hope we'll have you back, or maybe I'll do an extended podcast with you so we can have deeper conversations on this. The emotional or mental stability component of this discussion, no one thinks a lunatic should be able to saunter in and buy a gun, but no one really necessarily can anticipate who's a lunatic and who's not, unless they have a criminal record or you're psychic. That will never be not the case. I mean, we'll never know, as long as it's legal to sell a firearm in this country, you'll never know everyone's mental state. I mean, hopefully we've got systems in place that will catch people with criminal or bad behaviors in their backgrounds. I think we've got systems in place to do so. But if somebody's crazy, they should just snap one day and go buy a gun and they have no criminal record, that's the same as going to buy a car and driving it through a McDonald's or something. I mean, right? There's really no difference. You can't be psychic and anticipate everybody's bad behavior.
No, you can't. And not only that, I mean, look, right now the federal law says if you're adjudicated as mentally defective, then you cannot own a gun. That means that if you've been involuntarily committed, you can't own a gun. Do we really want to get into a situation where if you've been, prescribed an antidepressant, all of a sudden you lose your gun rights? Or if you have ADHD, you can't own a gun anymore? That's absurd. Even the vast majority of people who are mentally ill are never going to be violent. But, Chris, we do have a mental health crisis in this country.
Yes.
And that's really where I think a focus needs to be on, not just in terms of preventing mass shootings, but in terms of preventing suicides, in terms of the lockdown over the past year has exacerbated this for so many people.
Yeah, how many guns, Cam, I'm sorry to interrupt you. How many guns, out of curiosity? Do you know the stats on that? How many guns have been used in suicides this past year under the lockdown conditions?
I don't know over the last year, but I can tell you that, over the past 10 years, the number of suicides in this country has been going up. The number of gun-related suicides has actually been going down. It's still about half of all suicides are firearm-related. But, again, the issue is suicide. Even in states like Connecticut or Indiana that have had red flag laws on the books for 20 years, the number of gun-related suicides decreased, but the number of suicides overall increased. So to me, the goal isn't, let's get somebody to kill themselves in a different way. To me, the goal is, let's get somebody to not kill themselves. Let's get somebody to preserve their life and to get through that tough time and to emerge on the other side. And I think, honestly, one of the great disservices of the gun control movement is it distracts us from doing real concrete things that can make a real difference in people's lives. And instead we get this false promise of, we just ban the guns, everything's going to be great.
Mm-hmm.
It's detrimental. It's not just that it's nonsensical. It's detrimental to our country to focus on these gun control provisions.
It's the Cam and Company podcast at townhall.com, bearingarms.com, the resource to get really sane, sober analysis of this very important issue. Thank you, Cam Edwards. I hope we'll have you back soon.
Always good talking to you, Chris. Thank you, sir.
All right, let's go to the mailbag from Jim. Chris, I've been listening to you since you got to the Philadelphia area. You are a master of your craft. Why, thank you, Jim. He said, I hear you mention that you were looking for a new church, and your wife was raised Catholic. I would encourage you to look into the Catholic Church. Yes, the Catholic Church has its problems. There are bigger reasons why. Unfortunately, most Catholics don't understand their faith, and that is the fault of the leaders in the church. I've studied many Christian religions. I've come to the conclusion that the Catholic Church is the church that Christ started. Thanks for your great insight and levity in the morning. That's from Jim. Jim, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. There's no shortage of opinions on that subject. I won't even wade into it, but I know where your heart is, and I appreciate it. Stephanie says, Chris, I just heard your interview with Luke. Luke Rosiak. Yeah, she said he wrote a book a while back that was fantastic. It was all about that IT scandal, the Awan brothers, who are Pakistani nationals, and breaches into computer systems of Democrats in Congress. Do you remember what I'm talking about? I do. Debbie Wasserman-Schultz, the wet chihuahua, former DNC chair. She's the one that hired these people. I did not know that. Anyway, it was all swept under the rug. Never heard any more about it again. But I guess Luke, our guest, Luke was on to talk about the critical race theory stuff that was being exposed in Virginia, in Montgomery County schools in Virginia. Was it Montgomery? No. Which county? Never mind. Anyway, he came on to talk about the D.C. area, Virginia schools, that parents were complaining about the teachers, and teachers were coming back at them. If you heard that podcast, I think that was last week. But Stephanie said Luke did some great investigative reporting on that scandal in the House with the IT stuff and the Pakistanis. I remember that well, Stephanie. Yes, thank you for the reminder. Gail said, Chris, after hearing your story about the New Jersey congressman that was threatened, Jeff Van Drew, I felt compelled to dash off an email, and I got a response. And boy, she did. Let's see, Gail wrote, I don't live in your county. I'm appalled and disgusted that you would hire somebody like this Guy McCall writing for you. If your editorial board has any decency, you'd never print another word from him. Don't implicitly condone violence. Yeah, if you didn't hear that one, that's another great podcast from last week. A guy wrote and left some nasty voicemails for Congressman Jeff Van Drew, the Democrat flipped Republican in South Jersey, and you heard that conversation here. Anyway, Gail got a response from the newspaper editor that said he does not and did not work for the newspaper. He's a local resident who submits periodic letters to the editor. We allow our readers to submit their views to the editorial pages. His phone message to the congressman was abhorrent. If I knew the contents of it beforehand, I would never have published his letter to the editor as a guest column. Without even knowing the contents of the phone message, what he wrote should have been edited, so there wasn't even a hint that felt threatening to the congressman and his family. That was a mistake. I publicly apologize to the congressman as well. Nothing like that will ever happen in this newspaper again. That's from the editor and publisher of the Ocean City Sentinel in New Jersey. David Nathan is the guy's name, or Nahan. So, Gail, thanks for following up on that, and that's just a little follow-up for folks that were listening to that. Haven't crimes against Asians primarily been in the ghetto where they are robbed while running Chinese food takeout businesses? Not so many white Christian Trump supporters there. We have to start a just say no, as coined by the good Nancy Reagan. That's Deb in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania, just outside Philadelphia. Thank you, Deb. Tim said, Chris, thanks for sharing Christine's talk at the school board meeting. It was well said. I'm really glad you gave her a harumph for your sake. She may want to consider a career in media. That's from Tim in Wilmington. Thank you, Tim. I want to say hi to my friend Dale. Dale listens. He's in politics locally in Kansas City. He said if I'm ever back in town, he wants to grab a steak. Dale, thank you. Susan said, I've never heard a more heartfelt response listening to a podcast. Or no, I'm sorry. She said, I've never had a more heartfelt response listening to a podcast than yours about your family struggles. I feel the sorriest for children, especially teens, living through this pandemic. I have reevaluated my life last year also. I looked at my Catholic faith. I decided my relationship with God was more important than all the rules I was following. And on a whim, my husband and I bought a small place at the beach in New Jersey. I hope we'll eventually move out of Pennsylvania to a warmer climate like the free state of Florida. I decided I have to find more like-minded friends or different hobbies. I'm bored by my girlfriends always being mask police and hating on Trump. I realized that after God, your spouse and family is everything. I think COVID has actually been good for me to adjust my life plans and perspective. I know that you will have the same outcome. This is God's plan. Thanks for a great podcast. You're the best. That's from Susan. What an awesome, honest, reflective email, Susan. I really appreciate that. I wish you all the best. Good for you for reevaluating life. Pat loves her Dr. Seuss is greater than Dr. Fauci shirt. Most of you that ordered them should be having them by now or getting them very, very soon. Got a nice email from George who said wanted to thank you and Fast Eddie, your producer, and everybody at your radio station in Philadelphia, AM 990 The Answer. Want a T-shirt there. Said thanks for continuing to put on a good show. We pray for you, your family, your station, and our great country. It's from George. And the picture, he sent a picture of his lovely... is this him? I'm not sure who this is. Oh, it's wife. Yep, it's his wife. He sent a picture of his wife holding up the shirt. That's nice. Thank you, George. Let's see. Rosanna says, Chris, I wanted to thank you for having Josh Parsons, the Lancaster County Commissioner, on your radio show. I'm scheduled for my vaccine tomorrow. I registered last Thursday, March 11th, received email yesterday to schedule an appointment. This is a week or less I received a reply. I live in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. I have 4 underlying conditions. I registered over 2 to 3 weeks ago with 8 to 10 websites. I heard nothing. Wow. Anyway, she said, I love your show. Happy you're back on the air. And God bless. Rosanna, thank you. Good luck to you. I hope everything works out with your vaccine. You get what you want and what you're looking for. Shane says, Chris, one of the things that's bothering me from nearly all the commentators, left and right, is the use of the word vaccine for the COVID shot. Is it really a vaccine? A vaccine is defined as a substance used to stimulate the production of antibodies and provide immunity. For example, the MMR vaccine that we all take as youngsters provides immunity from measles and mumps and rubella. What are we being told? That this COVID shot provides immunity? No, it doesn't provide immunity. That even if you get the shot, you could still get the virus. It'll just have a lesser impact. So with that being said, isn't that like a flu shot? The flu doesn't provide immunity from the flu. It just helps lessen the symptoms if you get it. I realize the flu shot also changes from year to year. But I think that this dovetails into how the experts are now suggesting that COVID shots may require annual boosters. Sure sounds a lot like a flu shot to me. I guess it's really a nomenclature issue, but to call it a vaccine is a misnomer, in my opinion. Go Bearcats, Elite 8 again. That's from Shane in Shawnee, Kansas. Bearcats, he's referencing Northwest Missouri State Bearcats, where apparently he's an alum. So am I. Thank you, Shane. Andrew says, Chris, your show is very profound this morning. This was back on the 19th. Your approach seems to be to shine the light on the rot that's eating away at our society and our culture. Without a doubt, it can be demonstrated, as is being done by the content of your program. The root of the problem is the moral decay of the individual, propped and fostered by a Democrat policy to proliferate the problems writ large. It clearly shows that these policies are a direct attack on the body and soul of the nation. Well said, Andrew. Thank you very much for that. Chris, you're all over it. It's Obama and his hack pack. Joe is a catatonic stooge. That's from Ray. Had a very interesting discussion today about on the radio show about whether or not Kamala Harris, this unbelievable memo that came out. The White House is demanding that all executive branch offices, all the departments, energy, commerce, all of them, they all address the White House as the Biden-Harris administration or the Biden-Harris White House. Even their official Twitter feed, check it out, says Biden-Harris. So took some calls today on what people thought that meant. And it's amazing the number of people that don't think Joe Biden is going to make it through the year, that it'll be President Harris soon enough. Email me your thoughts on that if you have them. John said, Chris, I occasionally drive through the Kensington neighborhood of Philadelphia when I was working. Residents' homes are like living in a self-imposed prison without committing a crime. The Asian narrative is a deflection of reality, false reporting. Thanks, good show. That's from John. He attached a picture or two. Thank you, John. Jerry said, I've been meaning to ask for a while. I'm a loyal listener, but obviously I don't hear everything you say 100%. Perhaps sometimes I wasn't listening when you explained there are advertisements on your show that happen in Spanish. Do a lot of listeners listen that don't speak English? Funny that advertisers would think there are a lot of non-English speakers. I don't speak Spanish. Just a point of curiosity. Love your show. Love your podcasts. I love getting to laugh. Your Biden impressions are hysterical. When you did the Visiting Angels bit, I spit out my coffee. Fauci's a riot, too. It's a great way to start my day. Jerry, thank you. Again, I stress this. I think most of you that listen to podcasts are pretty hip to this, pretty savvy. But when you stream my radio shows, you got to know who you're streaming through. If it's iHeart, if it's radio.com, if it's some other means, there are lots of ways to stream a radio show. So if you're not streaming it from the, for instance, Philadelphia's AM 990 The Answer app or from the website directly, if you're not going directly to the radio station's properties to stream, if you're streaming through a third-party app, those people sell ads and they'll run anything they want while we go to break. So that's just something a lot of people don't necessarily know yet, but I think people will get more savvy about as time goes on. But thanks for the question, Jerry. Chris, I've been listening to you since you started your show in Philadelphia. I think you're terrific. Today I saw you on Fox. I didn't recognize you. I'm not one for beards, but some are better than others. Yours was far above the limit. You may think that since you're on radio, it doesn't matter what you look like. If so, you are wrong. It should be trimmed, and one of the shows has a razor sponsor. You should get in touch with them. It's not only ugly, but it makes you look so much older and sloppy. I don't know how your wife and children can stand looking at you. Well, thank you. It's great to hear from you. Always appreciate the kind words about my television appearances. Did you hear a word I said while I was the guest talking about the rising violent crime and its causes? I guess not. You just saw the beard. Dwight says, so the media is pointing to the shooter's references to COVID as the China virus, but the media continues to use South African variant and British variant to describe the new virus. Good point, Dwight. Brian says, I love your show. I'm glad you're doing one back in Kansas City. I wanted to provide you with a bit of info and facts that I think you may want to share. At the core of the illegal immigrant discussions, we always hear the number of illegals at 11 million. I heard Anderson Cooper use that when talking to Biden. That number's completely false. 11 million was 15 years ago. Are we to assume that in 15 years the net illegal population has stayed even or been reduced? No, it's true. Most people put it at least 30 or more, but I'm glad you pointed it out. Thank you. Chad said you had a great show, but that beard, really? Okay, little joke. On a more serious note, I always prayed that Rush felt as good as he sounded. In the same sense, I hope you enjoy your work as much as you sound like you do. Keep up the good work. That's a really kind note, Chad. I do enjoy my work. When we have technical glitches, it's a problem because I wish I could fix it. I know how frustrating it is when things don't work. I really hate that, and we're having some terrible difficulties. And I will say I'm amazed at the number of people. I tweeted this, like the number of people, and it's not most of this audience is wildly understanding and kind, but I am always kind of amazed at people who will complain about free things. I mean, it's, I'm not whining about doing this show every day, but it's like, we don't charge for it. It's completely free, and we try our best to get it out and get it done and do it well and do it right. But man alive, there are some people that are like, you have screwed with my day and I want answers. And it's like, well, I mean, I really appreciate your support, but sometimes things just happen. So that gets a little tough. I'll also say I have been inundated, folks. I can't even read them all. I wish I could read them all to you. But I just got a ton of Kristi Noem emails, and I just want you to know I read them all. I appreciate your commentary on it all. I'm not ignoring you. I'm not trying to be disrespectful or sound disrespectful at all. This Kristi Noem thing, let me just try to go through this one more time. You heard the show yesterday, I hope. And for whatever reason, some people reached out to me suggesting that my takeaway or my claim or something was that Kristi Noem is dead and buried and is no longer a political entity. That was not my assessment. That is not my take. I have no way of knowing what people think of Kristi Noem. I can just tell you how it landed on my ears. And what I was trying to do was explain to you, it is obviously popular with conservatives. It's obviously popular with South Dakotans that biological males should not be allowed to compete against biological females in K through 12 or collegiate sports, and the legislature wanted to codify that into law. Kristi Noem consulted with some legal people in her state, and she feels if she signs that into law, it will be challenged in court. She feels she will lose. She says the NCAA will threaten to pull sanctioned activities and tournaments from her state, causing competitive sports to pack up and leave, causing a loss of revenue. So, look, I'm just telling you that there were a lot of conservatives online that went after her and said that was her caving and folding and that she wasn't standing up for principle. That's all I'm telling you. I'm not saying that was my position. I'm just trying to paint the picture and tell you what's going on. And when people don't agree, man, on our side, it's like we all get into this weird pissing match of who's the purest conservative thing. And I don't want anything to do with it. I'm just trying to explain to you what's going on out there. You can decide for yourself what you feel. Ultimately, my point is, Kristi Noem, I thought, was making a pragmatic decision. She said she needed more help. She needed more backup. She needed more counsel. She needed more states to buy in because the NCAA was too big an entity and would do her too great a harm if she did this by herself. So she wanted backup. Some conservatives took that as the chicken way out, the cowardly way out. Now, she got on with Tucker Carlson. I played the clips for you yesterday, and she went at Tucker and said, I'm not going to let the right-wing conservatives bully me, and I just found that off-putting. I didn't like her use of that word. I've never heard a fellow conservative, describe right-wing bullies. It just, to me, it sounded like something Chris Christie or Jeb would say. Kristi Noem has given me no indication she's anything less than a solid conservative. I just found it very jarring and odd to hear her use the term right-wing conservative like a pejorative or suggesting that people are bullying her. I don't think it's bullying. I think it's a principled stand that a lot of us want a fight, that we want to fight on this thing. We want to make sure that this does not get its talons into the popular culture, that our girls deserve to play competitive sports without competing against biological men. This isn't hard to understand, and it's a principled fight that a lot of us have and want to have in this country, and conservatives are frankly tired of being taken advantage of, being lied to, being ignored, being shoved aside. It's obviously, that's why Trump was so popular. And so some people took Kristi Noem as caving or not listening or being political. Now, since Kristi Noem has given other interviews to people like Glenn Beck, and so I keep getting this link, and people can say, "Oh, Glenn Beck agrees with her. Glenn Beck agrees with her." I don't look, respectfully, I don't care what Glenn Beck thinks. I've heard Mark Levin. Mark Levin's not going to throw over. I'm not. I respect these guys. It has nothing to do with me trying to convince you Kristi Noem is damaged goods. It also has nothing to do with me trying to convince you Kristi Noem should be the next president of the United States. I'm telling you, I've always liked her. I've had no reason to even raise an eyebrow at her until this weird hiccup. And some of you are saying, you're not even hearing it. You don't get it. Yes, I do get it. I explained to you why I get it. I understand the position she's in. But I kept getting these condescending emails. You're playing checkers and she's playing chess. She's smarter than you. Glenn Beck pointed it out. Glenn Beck knows she's smarter. I didn't say she's dumb. I didn't say she's not up against it in a hard way and rocking a hard place. And I even said I was willing to give her the benefit of the doubt, and I called her pragmatic. But boy, some people that listen to this show did not take that from my conversation yesterday. All they heard was somehow that I was telling you Kristi Noem's dead and buried and she's not a political entity. And by the way, some of you have emailed me since to say exactly that. Kristi Noem is finished. She's a coward. She sold us out. We need fighters. I'm never going to support her. And if you won't say it, I will. So, look, I've gotten both emails. I am not in the business of telling you what to think about somebody that I can't even vote for right now. She's the governor of South Dakota. This is going to be up to South Dakotans to reconcile with her. If she wants to be a national candidate someday, we'll watch and see how this unfolds. I'm not in a hurry to call her politically dead. Some of you are. But I've been doing this long enough, folks. I don't need, lectures about what Glenn Beck thinks. I'm perfectly capable of walking and chewing gum at the same time, and I understand that she was trying to be pragmatic. I also understand that there are a lot of people that are really tired of pragmatics, and they just sometimes want to fight, and I get that too. So, was Trump always pragmatic? No. Some people believe that was his Achilles heel, that he wanted to fight too much when he shouldn't have fought. I hear it. I hear it all. I'm just telling you what I hear. It is not an enviable place to be here behind a microphone trying to thread a needle like this when our side starts to go to war over an issue like Kristi Noem. It sucks. I hate it. I don't get into primary fights. I don't tell people how to think about primary candidates. I don't tell people how to think about conservatives and whether they're for them or against them. I just try to give you my fair assessment. And my fair assessment was I understood her position. I didn't particularly care for her being so standoffish and using right-wing conservatives as a pejorative. If, in fact, that's what she is, and I think she describes herself as conservative, I just found it weird that she would refer to conservatives as bullying her. That's all. That's all. Please don't write me and try to convince me that Kristi Noem is great and I'm short-sighted, and because I get it. I get it. All right. So I'm going to close up mailbag for today. That'll do it. Thank you for your patience with us. If you stream online and you've been having trouble the last couple of days, I actually got kicked off my Kansas City show because of our internet trouble yesterday. So I hope we'll be back in the studio tomorrow. I hope I'll have this whole thing figured out, certainly by Friday. But keep your email coming. Keep your tweets, your Facebook posts. Parler, I'm there. Linked all of it at chrisstigall.com. Hope you'll give this a 5-star review and a written review if you're an Apple iTunes customer, and subscribe. And I will see you back here tomorrow. Thanks for listening.
The Chris Stigall Show Podcast.